Have you ever heard of emotions getting stuck in your physical body and then manifesting into illness? In today's episode, we talk with Dr. Maria, who is a physician and author who helps her patients rewrite their own story by tuning into themselves, improving their health through community and lifestyle changes. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. I'm Trish.
And I'm Julie. We are two nurses exploring holistic healing and wellness practices to empower you to be the leader of your own health. Join us as we try out new things, or as we call it, weird shit, and have some fun along the way. Today, we will be speaking with Dr. Maria. She founded Salud Revisited, an integrative and lifestyle medicine practice in Texas. She is a trauma-informed physician, recognizing that the events of harm to one's life have affected the body, mind, and spirit. Her approach to care is your body tells a story and you can rewrite that narrative. She is the author of Healing Wounds of Medicine, Stories and Journaling for Physicians. Welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project, Dr. Maria.
Thank you for having me, Julie and Patricia.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Doctor, if you don't mind, I'm curious. Did you start in allopathic medicine before moving over to integrative medicine?
Yes, I actually practiced normal Western traditional medicine probably almost like 10 years. Now, what is interesting is as a child, I grew up with back problems, back pain, diabetes, asthma, and it was really the back pain more than anything else that took me to I need other options. The physical therapy that I was getting was not helping me. They spoke about surgery. My dad said, "Oh, no, we're not going to do surgery." When I went to medical school and when I was in residency, I realized, oh, there are some tools that are very healing that are missing from traditional medicine. And that I think that people need to know that they're out there and that should be part of their care. Sometimes we talk about wellness and then healthcare, but really they should be combined. That's part of what I have tried to do as I have been practicing, and that's the concept behind the practice that I have.
Was that a challenge going from a very conservative or Western-based foundation to shift into a more holistic career path?
In a way, yes and no. I would say no in the sense of because I discover healing modalities for myself and my body and in my health journey. You don't have to convince me that it works. And that sense is very easy. Now, what is challenging is I have had to re-educate myself. I have done the American Lifestyle Medicine college training. I am completing my fellowship in integrative medicine. I just started my acupuncture. So on top of still, because my license is as an allopathic physician and I still need to maintain that license and do that CME, on top of that, I'm doing all of this other education. That's where it's challenging. And it also presents this long term. If I'm going to practice one way more than the other, then how do I maintain the license that allows me to practice and see my patients? So absolutely, it's challenging for myself. I think also the other challenge is that because people see behind my name the MD, sometimes people are like, "So what is it that you do? And how is it that we pay for your services?" And they get a little bit lost. And when I finally explain to them, they're like, "Oh my God, that's so cool."
I have to say, Dr. Maria, as you probably know, Julie and I are both nurses, and we are also in that way of re-educating ourselves in a whole new mindset. I'm also in a doctorate program for integrative medicine as well. I've become a Kundalini yoga instructor, and I think this is a new path for many of us that have been in the traditional healthcare field is how do we start interweaving our previous world with the new, and I want to say new world, because a lot of these have been practiced for long before the practices of allopathic medicine. I think it's more about how are we going to start to integrate them more, weave them together, and at the same time, have people take a more proactive approach in their own health and wellness care. I'd like to know have you found has been the most important thing that a patient comes with that leads to their own success?
Oh, so that a patient has that leads to their own success. I would say mindset has a lot to do with it. Yes, there's this component about motivation that has to be deeper than, for example, I want to lose weight because I want to look in a certain way. That's a motivation, but I have found when there's deeper motivation, like I want to lose weight because I'm in my 60s and I want to be able to play with my grandkids and bend on the floor and pick them up. That sustains them more. And definitely the mindset, what I mean by that is, and personally, I feel, and I think that sometimes it can be very challenging for people to live a healthier life and incorporate certain things into their lifestyle that are going to keep them healthy. That goes beyond practicing yoga. I also teach yoga or doing certain things because culture and society, in a way, take us in a different journey. Sometimes I really feel that patients are not completely at fault, if I might say that, in terms of having certain illnesses, because it's going against a lot of what Western culture dictates. But I truly believe that those patients that already come with a very deep motivation and a mindset of, I can do this, even if you need to guide them, they have good outcomes.
I think there's a lot of complexity to our healthcare system, our culture around health. We're constantly bombarded with pictures of what health looks like, but those pictures may not actually be real people. It can be confusing for the regular person trying to navigate their life, their lifestyle, their family, and also meet the goals, so to speak, of what health really is. Then you add in the financial piece around insurance and what you're spending your money on. That all together creates the perfect storm for not actually being very healthy. When you have a new patient that comes to you from that type of world, what are some of the first things that you talk to them about, small steps to start to change their mindset to begin that health journey?
One of the things, and this I learned with the author of Atomic Habits. I don't recollect his name, but he has Atomic Habits. It's really good for change in behavior. But the one thing that I found even to be more like, oh, wow, that I haven't heard in medicine. Medicine, we talk a lot about motivational interviewing and how to use certain tools to help the patients themselves come up with the plan and how they're going to change behavior. But it was this concept of identity comes before behavior. I was like, wow, I think that's the really missing piece. Then when we approach a patient and we might be, right, we have to change the way that we eat or movement or management of stress, we might, again, address the behavior without the identity tap to it. Instead of, for example, approaching it like, I want to run 30 minutes a day as I am a runner, and how to shift that mindset from the doing to the becoming. That for me has been even challenging because, again, I was not trained like that. I was trained as you are prescriptive, you problem, you diagnose, solution. Even with motivational interviewing, what you're trying is, again, to come up with that solution to the problem. But when you approach it from an identity perspective, you're not even looking at the problem because people are not necessarily a problem to be fixed or to be controlled. There's this shift in identity that I think that is extremely important attached to their health goals.
I absolutely love that statement. Identity comes before behavior. You're right. That is not something that we talk about in our typical world, especially when it comes to any sort of change management. Even in the hospital sector, when we're working with groups of people and we're instituting a change, the big thing they're focusing on is the communication and what we're changing. And we throw in the why, but the why is being used as more of a motivational factor, not really being seen as this massive transformation. When we're looking at change management in general, everyone goes straight to the action steps. What are you going to do and when are you going to do it? We're not really focused on the fact that the contemplation and the preparation are really something that needs to take a significant period of time. You could be in those phases for weeks and sometimes even months before you get to that action piece. And I know it's argued in one of the Changing to Thrive That's who I'm following for change management. They say a lot of the reasons that people fail in that action phase is because they didn't spend enough time in the preparation and the real contemplation phase. That to me sounds like that's the identity piece. That's figuring out what are you really working to become.
When you think about it, it is in a way saying, okay, so what are the voices that I have heard in my life? Again, what is the story, the narrative, and how I'm going to change them, but from a position of empowerment, where again, I can tell them what they need to do. I can give them the plan. Versus if they start from this position of empowerment, and in a way, they take charge, they take more of that control, more of that active role. Eventually, also, they become, in a way, more independent from it. Because then when they know this is who I am becoming, then the behavior starts to become aligned with who they are becoming. This is who I am, therefore I behave this way. That's something that, again, it's really missed. And I think that it is because, at least in medical care, the training is very, you solve the problem. How many times was I told during training, the patient doesn't know any better? Therefore, the system does a lot, and I can understand navigating healthcare might be hard, but then we do so much that we can, in a way, distance people, and then they're not their own agent. Therefore, when you are not even the own agent of your health, how are you going to retake your health? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I was also thinking along the lines of when we introduced you, we talked about how your philosophy is around that your body tells a story. Can you walk us through what that really means to you and how that empowers your patients?
Yes, I'm going to give you a personal example. Again, growing up, I was a child with diabetes. I grew up with diabetes. And you can say, yeah, you were a chubby child or an overweight child. And yes, I grew up in Puerto Rican. We eat beans and rice 2 times a day. And my mom, one of her love languages is cooking and cooking Puerto Rican type of desserts. So yes, there was a big, strong component of food. But what I have realized growing up, I also think that one of the reasons that my body was not as resilient as the body of my older sister and my younger sister is because of how I was handling the environment at home. All of us have stories of pain and of harm. We all do. And in my case, it had to do a lot with mom and dad's dynamic at home. And then the fact that there was a big component also of loneliness, not only where I felt isolated from my sisters, but then also lonely in the sense of friends. What I can see now is that my body didn't have that capacity to manage that and didn't have that resiliency. And I strongly believe that even thought, yes, I probably was not having the ideal nutrition or diet or way of nourishing my body. I also believe that my body by itself, that stress, that I cannot overtake the environment in a way, my body became sick. As I grew up, I started to do things to manage my back pain. I don't have diabetes now. When I go to the doctor, I have my glucose check. But the other thing that I have learned and that still today I have to work at is this. I am going to allow my body to not be stressed and to not be in tension. That for me does not come naturally. That's where I think that a lot of the power for me to rewrite that story, where it's not only I don't have diabetes, but it is now my body has developed ways of self regulating. As a child, I didn't. So it's not to say that all experiences of pain are going to lead to diabetes or to a medical condition. But what we do know from the studies is that, especially growing up, if you have a high, what we call adverse childhood score, event score, where you had a lot of in your childhood, you are at risk of certain medical conditions. And I strongly believe, especially again, when it comes to this, let's heal, let's change behavior, let's transform identity. If you do not see what has affected your identity, then it's very hard to become something new or a new person.
That's fascinating. Thank you very much for sharing such personal details about your upbringing. I think you're right. There's a lot of events that form you when you're growing up as a child, and some of those can be traumatic to one child in the household and not to others. And that's what makes us human individuals and brings color to the world. When you start to explore some of those things in your upbringing, what are some ways that people can explore that on their own, or do you feel like they need professional support in that?
Yeah, really, I don't think that necessarily there's this answer for everybody that fits everybody. But I can tell you that not necessarily you would need professional in terms not everybody needs to see a mental health provider, right? Now, what I do think is that everybody will meet people, whether that is coaches, a really good friend, support groups. And the reason being because one of the things that us humans, we all need in order to heal some of that pain is that we need that empathy component. We need that attunement from another human being that tells me I see you and I see your pain. Even thought I'm a strong advocate of journaling. And I think that journaling helps you put pieces together, develop awareness and introspection. I do believe that also at some point you need that other human component that can start to say, I see you. It can start to say, I cry together. That can start to say, I am going to name those things that happen to you that maybe you don't even have the capacity to name with truth, while at the same time upholding your emotion, at the same time providing you this container for emotions that sometimes can be overwhelmed. So not necessarily a therapist, but I do believe that at some point you will need people that can start to provide that other human piece that you miss in that moment.
I think you speak so eloquently there of the importance of community and why it's important that we build communities and why it's important we all be a part of a community. It's not just identifying our problems, it's also about being seen and being heard, and in some ways, being held in that. What I'd love to know, Dr. Maria, is how do you create that community piece where your patients do feel seen and held in your own practice?
Yeah, have the advantage of time. And what I mean by that is, I think it's extremely hard for a patient to feel seen when you're in the rush of one after the other, meeting the metrics, meeting the numbers, writing the prescription. The fact that I have that time that I can spend with them where not only talking about their health goals, but then tell me what happened. Do you remember there was a trigger for something that happened in your body with this symptom? Then you can start to go and see. You also get to know this person. Again, you can go deeper into we're here because we want to reduce your A1C versus we are here because you want to be able to pick your grandkids from the floor. And right now, you are afraid that the way that your health is going is not going to allow you that. Recently, one of the things that I did with one of my patients is I did this. Let's close our eyes. Can you imagine this moment? Because he was really struggling. We did this exercise where we used our imagination and she was able to see herself, describe the grandkid, describe the people around her. And I told her, I want you to hold on to that and use that image every day when you are able to know the person that you are working with more than the disease, more than the numbers. People start to be seen. And that's in a one-to-one level. The other strong belief that I have is that we need more what we call in medicine group visits or medical group visits. It's one of the things that I want to incorporate to my practice because we all know that loneliness is the equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes and it has become the new smoking. As human beings, we cannot solve the suffering of another human being. We don't have necessarily all that power. But I think that we can be purposeful about how we start to design spaces, practices, environments, so that in a way we start to contribute to the good versus the bad.
How do you think this pandemic that we are coming out of has impacted loneliness and disconnection and health? Do you see any connections there, or do you think that just brought to light what was already underlying?
I think that the pandemic probably exacerbated and brought to light more of what we knew, especially for some people. I know of some people that, on the contrary, they were in the busy, not necessarily connected, but busy. And then the pandemic brought them to this, oh, wow, this is how it is living, doing less. I do believe also that it exacerbated a lot of the anxiety, a lot of the fear, anxiety grew. It was obvious the fear of dying, the fear of the unknown, the fear of there is no answers. And then there's all of this confusing voices, which we see a lot in healthcare. All of these voices telling people different things. Then people start to not know who to believe and not know where to go. I think that for a lot of people, the pandemic exacerbated the loneliness and it made them aware of I am alone versus solitude. Some people are able to embrace solitude, but then there's this loneliness, that component of it that I think that still there's a lot of that in a way are suffering.
Dr. Maria, I see confusion and fear can very much go hand in hand. Well, we do have a state of confusion, and we'll say it as simple as instituting certain mandates, but then people saying literature does not align with those. That causes a lot of confusion. It could be confusion about anything, really, but the confusion can lead to that fear inside. When you're outside the medical profession, and we're just speaking about that because of the conversation at the point, right? But anything that you don't have an innate awareness of, how can people manage when they are having this confusion and fear and they don't necessarily have a direct link and they're not sure where to go and what to do?
I think that the first place to actually start is in your body because that's where you're feeling fear. When fear gets activated in your amygdala, what we call the reptile brain, then it's even much harder to make decisions or execute, start in the body. If you are aware that you are feeling fear in your body, which that can be different for everybody. That can be butterflies in the stomach, that can be palpitations, that can be sweating of the hands, that can be this barely not breathing. I would say, can you ground your feet on the floor, whether you're standing, whether you're sitting? Can you ideally also take your shoes, maybe your socks off, so that all of a sudden, the first sense that we're activating is the skin and you become aware of where you are. Pay attention to your breath. I think that if we're able to use the breath, not necessarily that you start doing deep breath, you don't have to start doing any type of special type of breath, but can you just allow your body to breathe and just allow your body to breathe? Is there another sense that you can wake up to help you become even more aware of the present? That can be you can use your eye to pay attention to something that feels nice. It can be a plant, it can be a pet, it can be outside the window. And you paying attention to what your ears are hearing or maybe what you're smelling, even how the environment tastes. Can you use your senses to then calm your mind and activate that vagus response? Once your body is in a more state of calmness, then you can go to the confusion component, if that makes sense, because now this bulb is able to work. But it's hard and difficult. I can tell you go to Google and search your answers and read, but that might create more anxiety and more confusion. What I would invite you to do is to think, do you have a trusted, especially if it's related to health, do you have a trusted health professional? And it doesn't have to necessarily be a physician. That might be a physician, but there's a lot of people that work with coaches, with nutrition, right? With wellness professional. Because if you already have a relationship of trust, that will help that component of confusion because you trust this person. If you go have this conversation, they give you the answers. Can you hold on to that in that trust and then try to reduce the noise of the world, of Google, of the news, of what you're going to hear? Sometimes we do need to detach from the noise in order for our minds to be calm and to focus on one thing.
I really want to highlight what you just said there. All of it, I think, is amazing information that honestly, I think people should rewind and re listen to. But I think the biggest piece is that we need to learn to recognize what these emotions feel in our body. Because if we are experiencing an emotion like fear, we are not able to critically think. We are not able, therefore, to make an informed, rational decision. That's massively important because when we are experiencing fear, we want to do something. We want to fix the problem. We want to go direct into action. And I think people need to remember that if we're in that state, we're not able to take that right action because we're not thinking with that frontal lobe, that critical thinking portion of the brain. And I think that's massive because people think if they just take an action, they're going to get themselves out of fear. And you're flipping the script. We should feel into that, ground ourselves, and move through that emotion to a state where we can make a decision, bring our bodies and our emotions to a state where we can take more a right aligned action. And that right aligned action may not be what everyone else around you is saying. That's a pretty important piece as well.
Yeah. And I think that there might also be situations where your own body will tell you this is what you need to do. Because if you know anything about Stephen Levine and Tammy the Tiger, in a way, depending on the situation, your body will know how to take you to state, depending on the emotion. If you're able to come back to your body, attend to your own body then might tell you, and now this is what you need to do. The answer might become more clear, and then you're able to execute it. The thing is that you will learn to trust that intuition slowly. And your intuition will speak to you. It will probably cause even less confusion. But the thing is, you have to learn to be in your body, hear your body, and then trust that voice, the voice of your body.
Sometimes this is where I get a little confused is that my brain can go and I can have all kinds of thoughts that actually I probably shouldn't listen to because they're preserving my ego and safety and not necessarily what I really need. How can a person really differentiate between some of those kind of automatic negative thoughts that everybody has versus really tuning into that intuition of what you need and what's good for you?
Yeah. So I think in this talking about loneliness, in this shifting from loneliness to solitude. So learning to be with yourself. When you are with yourself, what are you going to use that time for? Which I think that using the time that you have with yourself, you should use it for that awareness, introspection, checking in with myself, almost like if you're third person, right? Or you can think of it as you have like a doll or a little tent or whatever it is inside your body, and you're going to start to talk to them, to speak to them. I strongly believe also that when you do that, sitting down with a journal or a piece of paper or whatever it is, and as things come up, starting to write it. Because what we know is that when we write, not when we type, but when we write, the right and the left side of the brain start to communicate. You have your thinking brain with your creative brain starting to connect and then starting to, in a way, solve problems, or it gives you a different perspective into life or into a problem or into a situation. But I believe that you want to do it weekly or every day, or monthly, where you start to learn to sit with yourself, to sit with your emotions, that little person inside of you, and start to pay attention. What is it that you need? And how can I give you what you need? Anything that is practice, it might be something that at first it might sound like weird or whatever you want to call it. But I think that once you start to do it, just like meditation, we don't start doing 10 minutes of meditation because that is very uncomfortable for a lot of people. But once you start to do it, it will become this thing that then you will gravitate towards too, because you will learn how much that helps you in a way they mentally think and be yourself.
As someone who historically said she was someone who could not meditate and who is now an active meditator, totally agree with that. But I wanted to also circle back to that last piece you mentioned, which is developing trust within ourselves. I can't help to think that building trust with ourselves is reflective with how we build trust in other relationships. It slowly builds over time. So when we have a massive crisis state, it's probably going to be difficult. Even if you got to the point of this is what my body's telling me to do, I'm not ready to take that big step to trust myself yet because I haven't developed that relationship yet. When you're working with people and they're to the point where they need to start to learn to trust themselves, what are some practices or techniques that you work with them to start building that relationship?
Yes, I think that starting with small, and this is what I mean. Let's say that you say, oh, I think that really what I need and what my inner selves need and what my intuition is telling me is to move to Europe. If you haven't practiced that, listening to yourself, trusting yourself, all of a sudden that big decision might not necessarily be the way to start. But can you start with something as simple as what does your body need? Does your body need sleep right now? Because we learn to ignore our bodies and live divorced from our body. Okay, your body is hungry, therefore you need to eat. Can we start with the small thing? What would you want? What does it feel like you want? Starting with those small things, I think that it's one. The other thing in this process is also developing that self compassion component, that grace component. And what I mean by that is sometimes we are afraid to say, oh, I'm going to take the dab is because fear of the uncertainty. What if I made a mistake? Now I'm living the consequences because I made that decision and the mistake. I think that also cultivating that compassion and that grace, where if you feel that you need to make X decision and you went ahead and you did it, if things do not happen as you anticipated, can you treat yourself with compassion and grace? And can you maybe look at it from the outside perspective? Because maybe things didn't work out as you wanted because of something that was out of your control or something that you didn't anticipate or you didn't have certain knowledge. Then can you look at it from the outside and say, okay, so what can I learn from this so that I feel that I can try again maybe tomorrow? Knowing that maybe if I made a mistake one time or if it failed one time, that doesn't mean that I can not try again. But this time I'm going to try from a place of I have learned. I feel more confident. I have more empowerment to then move forward.
I think that's something that many of us need is learning that self devotion and compassion for yourself. For women in particular, we tend to be givers and we put ourselves last. Do you see that difference between men and women? Men stereotypically they're all about being the provider. What differences do you see between men and women in that respect?
I think that working with my patients, what I can see is the confidence. There is more, this is who I am. I'm going to go out and conquer the world type of approach or attitude with male patients versus where female patients, it's almost like you have to sometimes convince them of their greatness and their capacity to conquer, yes, their world. My experience hasn't been necessarily that women versus men are better at self care versus the other, are better at listening to that intuition versus the other. Now, men are definitely more in that confident side. They make this decision, they execute without any trouble about what the outcomes will be. And if something goes wrong, they don't take it personally. Versus with female patients, there is more of that struggle, more of that place where they dance with one versus the other. And then if things do not go wrong, it can be more of the personal side of it, definitely.
Did you have any tips or ways then that specifically for our female counterparts, how we can step away deviation as something that's personal and something that's wrong with us?
I think that one would be, can you write your own mantra? And what I mean by that is sometimes as females, we need to hear words. And sometimes we might not hear them from our husbands or significant others or parents or dads, but can you develop a mantra that will help build up that strength to conquer your own world. One of my patients used the word goddess, and then all of a sudden she became, oh my God, what did I just say? And I'm like, well, that's okay. That's what came out. There's a reason what that came out. Can you take that empowerment? So I think one is that developing that mantra. I also think that one of those things that help women build confidence is some sort of movement. When you get into your body, when you move, there's like this almost spark of power that starts to awaken. You develop more of that confidence. And then I also believe that the more a woman overall can develop, it's almost like, I'm going to use the word independence. And what I mean by that is that one of the things that help females is when they gain knowledge and skill. I don't mean by that independence of not needing anybody and saying I don't need anybody and I don't need a partner. Nobody needs to take care of me. No, what I mean is the capacity to develop knowledge in areas where you feel, can I do that? And the skill. Because what I have found is that men are better at trying something and then being like, if it didn't work out, it didn't work out. Versus sometimes female are more in the performance, if that makes sense. I think it's important. The other thing is, again, is who is your community? Who are you surrounding yourself with? Because if your community are people that are going to speak you down and are going to be criticizing you and are going to be these negative words, then it's going to be very hard to build yourself up and to build that confidence to follow your intuition if you have a voice that is telling you what happened because you should have known better. I feel that also examining your community and where there is unhealthy community, can you start to slowly shift those relationships that are under your control?
Wow, Maria, this has been absolutely fabulous conversation. And I think that you started this conversation talking about empowerment and how we can be the leaders in our own health and wellness journey by controlling our own mindsets and our own actions. We're closing this on that same note on how, specifically as females, we can be empowered. We may need to take a couple extra steps and connect with our bodies in new and different ways. So I just wanted to thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell us, how can people find you?
People can find me on my website, www.saludrevisited, that is SALUDREVISITED.com. And on social media on both Facebook, Instagram, and then YouTube at Salud Revisited. That is at SALUDREVISITED.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Maria. We will certainly put all of those places into the show notes so our listeners can find you, in all different kinds of ways and ways that they can learn to embody a new identity and to create some community. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you. It was an honor. Thank you for the invitation, both Patricia and Julie.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, and share with a friend. Want to learn more about a specific topic? Drop us a line on our website and we can explore it deeper with you.